So in our previous lessons, we were using more of a 2D type of text effect. And now we're actually going to take advantage of the ray traced renderer, and we're going to create some extruded text that will have some shadows based on our footage that we have. And so what we want to do is we have our project open, and we want to pick the optimal parts of this footage that we can use. And so I think we have all seen the title openers where we have like some 3D text that is like kind of integrated with a city scene. And so that's what we'll be creating here. We'll have, how about directed by John Smith? So we'll have that just kind of hanging out next to this building, like it's just part of this scene. And then we're going to, so if you look, you can see the angle of all these shadows that we have. And so naturally the text will have just a little bit of this shadow being cast on the text. And then we're going to take all that and just make it all seem like it's all one piece. So we'll get started here by just grabbing the footage that we need. So I'm going to maybe come in, how about right at this 5-second mark. So what we can do is hit B, and that will tell our workspace to begin. And then let's see, maybe right as that building. So this building looks like a really good building. So we'll go ahead and just as it's out of view, maybe right in here, then we'll hit N. And so now that we have a nice little span here, then we're going to go to our composition and we're going to trim to our work area. And so now we just have this amount that we have here for our composition. And one thing that we can do though is we can go to composition settings and we can start our composition at 0 so that we can kind of just keep on the same page. And we'll hit OK. And so we have, looks like a perfect 10 seconds. I don't know how we did that, but we have 10 seconds of footage here. And so that'll be great for our example. And let's get started by analyzing our footage. So we can just right click and we can track our camera. And I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording in case this takes a little while. All right, that didn't take too awful long, but you can see we have all of our track points now. And so this is a little different than that water where we didn't have a whole lot of track points along the surface. Now we have track points everywhere. And if we even take our cursor and our selection tool and just kind of put it way out here, it's even grabbing these points that are way out there. So you can see we have all these little planes that we can put our little plane thing on, our little disc. And so what we can do is we can kind of decide where exactly we want our text to be hanging out. And so we don't have to actually make that many adjustments. So let's go ahead and we'll select this plane right here. So when I select this, then we can also hit Shift and just grab a few more of these track points to make sure that we have a nice surface. That'll just kind of keep it all nice and constant. And then I'm going to right click. I'm going to create text and a camera. So very similar to last time. But one thing that we're going to do differently is we're going to come over to our renderer and we're going to select that. And that is going to tell us that we need to, or it's going to have our 3D composition settings, and we can change that to ray traced. And then we're going to hit OK. And so it'll probably give us a warning. Well, it didn't that time, but sometimes it'll give you a warning to tell you like the things that you cannot do. And so some of those are creating masks or filters and things like that on top of your extruded layers or your 3D text and things like that. And so, the benefit of this ray trace is that we can take our text and extract it, or we can extrude it, and we can add bevels to it and things like that. And the thing that we cannot do is have track mats, and we can't add masks and effects to those layers that have been affected like that. So just keep that in mind when you're trying to decide which 3D engine to use. So now that we have our text layer, we'll go ahead and we'll just kind of back up. We want to make sure that we have selected the right plane, that it's not doing anything strange. It looks like it's doing great. So we can go ahead and we're going to take and grab that X handle, and we're just going to put our text over to the left. just like that. And then we're going to adjust what our type says. So remember, we decided we're going to go with directed by John Smith, the infamous John Smith. So we'll go ahead and type that out. So maybe directed by, and then John, can't type today, John Smith. We'll go ahead and add a line break in here. And then let's also take a look at the scale that we have for our text. And we want this to be, we'll have both of our lines be right aligned. And then we're going to go ahead and scale down our text. So hit S. We can go ahead and bring that down from 4,000. Bring it down just a little bit. Maybe about like that. And it looks like maybe we didn't even have to drag the X value over. So we can bring this back over to our building. But we do want to bring it up a little bit. Bring it up to where it's almost aligned. Looks like we have an extra space in there. There we go. And then maybe even we'll make the directed by just a little bit smaller. So maybe that'll be a few points smaller. And then for our John Smith looks pretty good. I think that's a pretty good size for Mr. John Smith. Let's get our selection tool. Maybe we'll bring this up just a little bit more. Just kind of align it at the top of that building. So now we want to just play that through, making sure everything looks good. All right. And then we're going to also just take that and just push it back just a little bit in Z space. Because we want that building to actually kind of come forward just a little bit. So everything looks great. All right, so here is the awesome part. So we're going to go ahead and extrude that. We're going to extrude our text after we actually adjust the spacing. Okay, it's bothering me just a little bit. I'm sorry, it's the designer in me. Okay, so we're going to keep that at 14. And now let's hit, with just that layer selected, hit AA. That's going to pull up our geometry options. And what we want to do is give it some extrusion depth. And so we can just click and drag, and we can give it an extrusion of maybe like 10 or so. How about, we're going to try 9. And then we're also going to need to create a parallel light. So go to Layer, New, Light, and it's going to be a parallel light. And for our intensity, let's maybe start out with about 200% or so, and no fall off. It needs to cast shadows, and then we can adjust our shadow darkness if we need to. We can maybe put that about 80% or so to start out with, and we might even name this parallel, and hit OK. And so what the parallel light is when you have a light bulb, then you have a source, and you know that source light comes from every direction, and a spotlight is the same way, except it's more of like a cone, and the light leaves that cone. But for a parallel light, think of it like the sun, where it's almost like an infinite wall of light that all kind of goes in one direction. And what we want to do is we want it to mimic these shadows. So what we'll do is let's go ahead and kind of take a mental note of the angle of these shadows, how they all kind of go almost like a 45-degree angle. And then we're going to go to our view. Let's make sure we have that light selected. And let's go to a custom, or no, let's do a top view. And then we'll take a look at that parallel light. So you can see that the parallel light, and if you don't have the parallel light in your window, you can go and view, and you can look at the selected layer, and that will just put that right in the middle of your window here. And so this little thing right here, this is the point of focus, or the point of interest, or where the actual light is heading. And so for that light itself, if you open that up and look at the light options, then you actually have like an area where the point of interest, so you have like where that light is hitting. And what we want to do is just grab that little point, and we're just going to drag it over to an angle that will mimic like those other shadows. And so now when we go back to our active camera, then you can see if we zoom in a little bit that those shadows now, let me bring this back to full view or full resolution, that they are now kind of going in that same direction. And so that's exactly what we wanted to do. So now that we have a nice light and we have extruded our text, then we're going to be adjusting all of these in our next lesson, and we'll be adding some shadows that'll be cast onto our text and be creating some track mats for our type.